There's nothing quite like an orchid for drawing practice and for getting comfortable with using really hot colours. I'm using a Fude 55 degree nib here, and I'm using a hot pink ink. It's called Fuchsia, and it's document ink by Diatramentis. Now, the way I draw works very well, and it's a technique I think you should try if you don't already use it. You just make these little measurements by eye. So every time you draw a line, you're constantly watching where it starts and where it ends, and how long it is in relation to all the other lines around it. And that's the key around it, because you can't go too far from where you're putting each line, or you lose your place and you lose your sense of scale. So I try to grow the drawing from a central point, radiating outwards in all directions. And that way, my estimates, I hope, won't be too far off. And sometimes I get them wrong. And it's a bit like doing a jigsaw puzzle. You'll know very quickly if you've got it wrong, because the lines won't match up. And that does happen to me occasionally, but I always correct any mistake I make as soon as I discover it and I get back on track. Now, this particular drawing of the orchid, it was very enjoyable because the shapes are quite simple and they're not fiddly. Even though they're intricate, it's not quite the same thing, because you're not trying to draw very, very, I suppose, precise shapes. Accurate, yes, but they're not, I don't know, teensy-weensy little fiddly shapes. There's lots of curves. And of course, the 55 degree Fude pen really comes in useful for all those beautiful curves, because as you move your pen along the line of a curve, the angle of the nib causes the lines to become wider and narrower as the nib moves around. Look at this hot pink. It really is quite something. I'm glad I used the fuchsia ink. I mean, you could use any colour ink. You could use black, you could use brown, you could use grey, doesn't matter. But I just like to match the colour of ink to my subject if I can. And luckily, Diatramentis and Sketch Ink by Roaring Klingner, they do a wonderful range of colours. Now, there are lots of other companies who make beautiful inks, but those are the two inks that I really, really trust, because they never clog my pen. And for any fountain pen artist, that's a huge one. Now, I've started to paint, and I'm using the hottest pinks I can find in my paint box. So they're a combination of Opera Rose and Quinacridone Magenta. With a little drop of Mineral Violet dropped in when the paint is still wet. And remember, the amount of water you use in your paint will determine how rich and deep the colour, less water, or how dilute and pale the colour ends up being, more water. You never use white in watercolour. For starters, it's going to make your water very murky, but that's not really what we're mainly worried about. It'll make your colours go chalky and opaque. So more water equals lighter colour, less water equals darker colour. And if you wait for it to dry, you can always put another layer on to make the colour deeper. And popping in some rich magenta into water just to make the colour spread through. Those tiny pops of yellow in the centre of the orchids. A little bit of burnt umber for the stem. Used quite concentrated. The brush I'm using is an R13 by Rosemary & Co. I've had it for about 3 years, I'd say. The first one I bought was 5 years ago, and after using it almost daily for 3 years, I decided it was time for replacement. Now, I still use both almost daily, imagine. And an R13 is a blend of synthetic and natural hairs. And the point means that you can be pretty accurate, and the blend means that you get the perfect balance between holding lots and lots of water, but the control of not holding just too much water. So it's a great brush and I highly recommend it. All my students, well, not all of them, but many of them have bought the R13 on my recommendation, and they all love them. So it's definitely an all-around brush. So Rosemary & Co. She's English, she's a lovely lady, and she makes fabulous brushes. Now, I hope you've enjoyed that video. If you've enjoyed it, you should consider signing up as a member for my classes, which will run once a week from September. And they're very accessible, not just in terms of price, but in terms of level of complexity and difficulty. And if you want to join a wonderful community of like-minded art lovers and creative people, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better place than my incredible worldwide community. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you again the next time.